Indeed, you're watching KBC Channel 1 and this is Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migwe. Good Morning Kenya continues now, and now we shift gears and talk about transformative leaders. Today we are focusing on a very important topic or aspect that is our culture and heritage. We are talking about promoting our culture and heritage. How much do you know about your culture? If you're asked today, how much do you know about your culture? What will be your answer? Today in studio, I'm privileged to be joined by Ms. Njeri Mbure, who is a communication and heritage specialist, ready to talk about promoting our culture and heritage. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Karibu sana. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here. Culture and heritage is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So yeah.
Yeah. So remember, you can be part of this conversation by tweeting to us at KBC Channel 1. My personal Twitter handle or X handle is at @mmigwe. And let's get into this. When you talk about culture, what are we talking about, and what role does it play in our own identity as a people?
So I think back in the day when we used to define culture, we used to be told it's our way of life. And so when we look at culture in that way, then it changes because our daily life then becomes our culture. But I think when it comes to heritage and culture, we're talking about who you are as a person, where you're coming from, what defines you. When we look at our heritage, now we start looking back at generations and generations of our parents, of our grandparents, and what they taught us and what we are learning, and even just around more aspects, different aspects. So, for example, when you talk about culture, we have cultural heritage, where we have intangible, which is what you can't touch, which are the practices, the stories we hear, the dances we see, but we also have tangible heritage, a cultural heritage, where we have the monuments and the sites, like the Kaya Mijikenda forest is a cultural heritage site, even though it's a forest, it's a sacred forest by the Mijikenda community that they're protecting as part of their culture and their heritage. Yeah.
You know, language is a very important aspect in every every setting. But then again, it also contributes to the promotion of culture. But you look at today's world, native languages are not as much emphasized. Why do you think that is happening?
I think we are moving towards more urbanization. Back in the day, when you look at different parts of country, we used to know that central Kenya only had a certain tribe. When you look at western Kenya, we knew that. But right now, that's not the case anymore. We have people moving to different areas for jobs. We have people coming to Nairobi, and then we have all tribes represented. So what happens is sometimes we end up having to speak one common language, which is Swahili, for us to understand each other. And in that process, a lot of people, unfortunately, don't know their mother tongue, either didn't learn it or were not taught, or even for some of us who know it, we're not able to continue this conversation with other people. We're also intermarrying with different tribes. So whose tribe will you teach the kids? Can they learn both? They have the ability. Kids are very smart, and especially when they're young with languages, they can learn. But at that point, when people are wondering which culture, which language do we adopt, we end up having to take Swahili, which is then a common language that I can speak to any Mwananchi in Kenya. So maybe, honestly, I think that's what has contributed to the fact that our tribal languages are not there. But it's not that they're not there. It's just that they're not as common as they used to be, and there are many things, as we've discussed, that have contributed to this.
Yeah, we talk of globalization, we talk of immigration, and also the aspects of industrialization.
Correct.
They have been attributed to contribute to economic growth, but on the other hand, they have been accused, if I may put it like that, of contributing to culture, to loss of culture. How then can we capitalize on these aspects to ensure that we preserve and promote our heritage?
I think, honestly, charity begins at home. If we understand the value of our culture, then it starts with you, it starts with me. And then collectively, we can work towards making sure of that. And it's very true, because when you live and work in a different country, you are able now to adopt to a new culture, right? You go find people doing different things, and you start doing things the way they're being done. As they say, when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do. So it's a very, I think when you look at it, it's just understanding it's not a bad thing to immigrate, because again, you also find different people of cultures. It opens your world, it opens your mind to different people. You learn about how other people are, but at the same time, are you able to still maintain your culture? I think for myself, who doesn't live here, what we do is, at the home we speak Swahili, we speak Kikuyu, because we are trying to make sure that we are moving we don't forget it, because once you forget, it's not easy to remember.
It's not easy to remember.
Yeah.
You know, we are living in a generation where now the Gen Z, they term themselves as tribeless. They are those things.
Yeah.
But then again, you wonder if they understand their culture. If somebody came and asked you today, what is your culture? And if, for instance, let me take, for instance, a Kikuyu. Do you understand the process of dowry payment? Or you just understand things to do with Rorasho is Rorasho, and there are things to it? If it came to a person like a Maasai, that process of getting married, do you understand it if you consider yourself a Maasai? How do we approach such situations? Because in a way it seems we are transcending our tribes, given this generation is considering itself tribeless.
I think what happens is, first of all, I understand why they consider themselves that way. It's because they've seen the negative effect of dying to your tribe, because we're not using our tribe sometimes very positively. For example, if I'm Kikuyu and someone is Kikuyu and they're going for office, we are overlooking their integrity, we are overlooking their qualifications, and we want to say, oh, mtu wetu ako hapo, that our person is there. And unfortunately, most times, do we benefit in any way when that our person is in there? We don't. So the reason I feel like Gen Zs want to look at themselves as a tribeless is that they're just saying that we will not let this culture of tribes affect us. But they know, of course, they come from tribes. I'm sure some of them can speak very fluently their mother tongues. It's, I think, just looking at different parts. And I think when they come to us as the tribeless nation, they're talking about it politically. And they're just saying, we will separate our tribe. We will look at more than just your tribe. We will look at your qualifications. What are you doing for us? How can we benefit from your leadership? And is this a transformative leadership?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So there's a way you can detach tribe from culture, given the kind of a goal you are looking at.
Exactly. That's really what it is, yeah.
Now, let's circle back to the aspect of language, because it's one of the things that are important in enhancing culture and heritage. You know, it's easy to teach native languages in the rural setting. But then again, you come to schools in urban setting, it's cosmopolitan. How can that be addressed, if at all we are talking about promoting and maintaining our culture and heritage? I
think, unfortunately, the trend has been that we've looked at English as the superior language, even when it is not our language. We used to know that, you know, you'll go to school, you learn in English, and so on and so forth. And of course, we were colonized by the Brits, so we understand where we are coming from. There is a lack of value and a lack of appreciation for our native languages. And you and I know that we even look down on people who can speak English. And if people can't speak English well, we make fun of them. Even in school, you remember if people used to shrub, people used to burst out laughing. Yet that is not even our native language. So if we start ourselves with an appreciation for our tribes, our native languages, or even our communal languages, even Swahili itself, I think we will have a different appreciation. I remember learning Swahili in school. It was difficult. I used to think, oh, I wish it was as easy as English, you know. But I think it's worth something that we ourselves need to invest in. We need to maybe pay more attention to that. What do you think are the biggest impediments of facing the promotion and maintaining of our culture and heritage? I think first we need an attitude change. It's like we need to reset the button, where we need to see that our languages are beautiful. Our languages are appreciated. I mean, we go to France and they speak their French with pride. You know, we'll go to different countries, as we were talking with you, as Italians, they'll speak their Italian with pride. So why wouldn't we also speak our tribal language? I know sometimes we're worried. I know I worry a lot when people don't understand, and I don't want them to think I'm talking about them, right?
Yeah.
But I think once we understand that our languages are beautiful and that we need to each of us play a role in appreciating that, then it becomes a ripple effect. If our generation feels that way, maybe the next generation will give it more attention too.
What role do cultural festivals within the country play in enhancing and promoting this heritage we're talking about?
So I think the festivals, first of all, are amazing. I haven't been to many, but I've been to the Lamu Cultural Festival that just happened this weekend. In a previous year, just post-COVID, when they hadn't had it for a while, then it came back. And I think for me, what I learned were the cultural practices that the Swahili culture does. You know, there was the basket weaving, there was the making of the traditional hats. And when I look at that, I feel like people are able to learn so much from what they can see. And one thing I loved is that they incorporated everyone. It wasn't just the Swahili, it was also other tribes, even Kikuyus that live close to Lamu were presenting. We had different tribes coming and doing presentations. So the festivals are important, and I think that's something that we should do more of and encourage young people. So how can we attract also these young people to come to those festivals? You know, there was dhow racing, there was swimming activities. So it stops becoming just a thing for Lamu or the Turkana festival, then it becomes a thing for everyone to come and appreciate culture. You're
also part of the organizing committee for the recently concluded Africa 24 conference that happened in Mombasa, and there was a lot that happened.
Yes.
What can you say was the impact of that in terms of culture and heritage?
So I think when we were organizing the International Council on Monuments and Sites, Africa 24, what we wanted to see was more conservation of built heritage in Africa. Bringing together, we had over 100 people with over maybe 30 countries represented, coming to get together with Africans and talk about how can we conserve our culture, how can we conserve our heritage. If you know that ICOMOS, which is an international body in Paris, it's one of the advisory bodies to UNESCO, and UNESCO is the one that inscribes the World Heritage Sites. Kenya is very rich in World Heritage Sites. We have 8 World Heritage Sites. And so when we look at such a conference, what we're hoping to do is, can we bring these experts, African experts, non-African experts, to all see how can we help Africa? Because the honest truth is that we have underrepresentation. Out of 1,223 World Heritage Sites, Africa only has 8%. So how can we make sure that people see our culture as something worth conserving and worth recognizing? Yeah.
You also involved, you're on the speakers at the Getting the Youth Involved. Talk to us about that.
So I think because once upon a time, someone gave me an opportunity as a youth to represent Kenya at the first African World Heritage Youth Forum. I thought what an amazing opportunity it would be to also come home and keep that going. So unfortunately, the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO had already organized their first National Youth Workshop on Culture and Heritage. So I joined them and I spoke about how the youth can get involved, just giving them ideas of, one of the things I love about the young minds, even where we were at Swahili Port Hub, which is a heritage hub, is that the young people are so good with their gadgets, you know. And sometimes young people will see these heritage things and think, oh, these are for old people. Especially when we look at the profession, we see white hair, we're like, oh, it's season, I have no place to fit. But I think one of the things that I've seen is that young people have something to bring to the table. And I think because I was involved in youth advocacy for World Heritage for a very long time, what we were trying to say is our points are valid. We need a seat at the table. We need to see more young people involved in making these decisions, because that's the way they learn. So opportunities are there for the youth to be involved, whether it's in tech, whether it's in photography, you know, making the reels, social media, or even just learning how they can be part of these panels. Because, for example, if it's ICOMOS, we have membership, we have an emerging professionals working group. They can come, learn, be mentored, and be able to even take careers in heritage and culture. You
know, you said something that touches on attitude.
Yes.
Because you involve the youth, and some of things about culture, they say it's for old people. But then again, we're living in an information age. How can the youth now capitalize on that to ensure they learn about the culture and also promote it?
First of all, we need a reading culture. It's been said that if you want to hide things from Africans, hide them in books. And so we understand that now a lot of people don't read physical books, but we also, as you said, we have gadgets, we have the internet, and we can be able to source for this information and know. And sometimes the beauty of it is, if someone is coming to you with facts, you can be able to counter or ask questions if you know what you're talking about. But if you don't know, if you come at me with even information that is not a fact, I'll probably accept because I don't know. But if I have done my own research, I've learned about all this culture and heritage that we're talking about, I think I'll be able to be like, okay, Mike, no, maybe we should ask these questions. How are we doing community involvement, you know, at this World Heritage Site, and so on and so forth.
Talk a little bit about the intangible cultural heritage.
So intangible cultural heritage happens to be what we can't touch, right? And so we look at our folklore, we look at our stories, we look at our dances, we look at practices as well. And I think Kenya, the recent one I know, is one of the practices of the Maasai community. And when we look at them, I think we forget that that can be heritage too. These are things that need to be preserved, because if you preserve such a practice, means generations to come will still appreciate it. And I think what people sometimes do not understand about preservation and conservation is all people are trying to do is call upon more people to pay attention to it, respect them. If we're talking about the sacred forest, we just don't want you to come in. Like, for example, on Friday, one of the activities we did for Africa 24 was go to the Kayamijikenda Sacred Forest. And they told us, unfortunately, we cannot let you into the forest because they hadn't done the cleansing. And we were very understanding, because we know that there are some practices that the elders need to do before we can come in. And so when we look at that, we understand, and we don't go arguing, because, you know, the normal person will be like, no, it's my right, I need to enter. No, it's not. They're the first priority. They're the ones who are at the forefront of protecting it. So when they tell us we can't go in, we need to understand why.
And we also need to bring about the fact that there's no culture that is superior over the other. Cultures are supposed to augment each other, especially in Kenya here, where we have diversity of culture.
I think that's something that, unfortunately, even when you think about when, you know, we were moving from a traditional kind of a setting to modern, we love our missionaries. They brought the gospel, right? But they also came with things that we hadn't seen before. I know when we visited, like, for example, a place in Wida in Benin, where they were taking the slaves, we were looking and they were showing us that someone was sold for a mirror. My head is going, you sold a whole human being for a mirror to look at yourself, because that particular king had never seen a mirror. And they were like, oh, I could look at myself every day and just tell Mike, you know. So it's very unfortunate, because there's no culture that is superior to another one, but we need to appreciate our own. We spoke about the language. We were speaking about how people who speak better English are sort of the better people. You know, no, we need to understand that there's value in our culture, there's value in our languages and our traditions. And if only we knew, people travel from miles away to come see the Maasai dancing, to come see how they live in the manyatas. We need to understand that we all possess that, because you come from a tribe, I come from a tribe. I need to go back and find out what was our culture, what did we do, and how can we still do these practices, because not all of them are possible. I can't wake up every day and pray facing Mount Kenya, but I can be able to know, like, there's some practices that are good and we can move them forward. Are we telling our stories, or are we defining our culture based on the way we understand it, or based on how someone told us this is what used to happen? So I think the thing that happens is, we, as Africans, our story has been told by other people for a very long time. And so we have had a shift. Different people are coming to the forefront and telling their African story as it is, helping people to appreciate where they come from and to see things differently. So we need, I think, when we look at how we're moving forward, because it's always that we are in progression, we are not at a place of perfection. If we can look at how do we progress, is that we need to tell our story from our angle. We need to be able to see how can we let our story from our angle be told, because as long as someone is telling your story, I love one of the speakers last week was Dr. Webb Andoro, who was the former executive director for the African World Heritage Fund, and he said, for as long as the hunter tells the story about the lion the story will always be how the hunter won,
Yes.
right? And so it's the same thing. We need to be able to tell our own story as how we see it and how we understand it. And it's not a conflict thing. It's just an opportunity thing. It's also a chance for other generations to know that they can do it.
So not a conflict thing, but an opportunity thing. From where you stand, what do you think government should prioritize on in as far as preserving and enhancing culture and heritage is concerned?
I think first, there are two things. I think we need to invest in the young people. As we were speaking with you this morning, I was telling you how I volunteered for over 7 years without a job in World Heritage. And so when I look at that, I'm like, surely I should have got it. 7 is a long time to wait for an opportunity to open up, right? But when I look at where I am today, because I'm working as the marketing manager for Ohio's only World Heritage site, I look at the people who gave me that opportunity and believe that I can do it, you know, given my background in communications and master in World Heritage. And I was like, these are skills I would have loved to be giving back at home, but we will go where the opportunities are. We know, you and I know the numbers when it comes to unemployment. So if we can invest in young people, believe in them, we can actually move this more. And even just when we look at the government, maybe investing in culture and heritage is something that we need to put our focus on. Yes. But we also understand where we are coming from. We are a country that has many other issues. You know, we have poverty, we have health, we have food crisis. So maybe even if we devoted a chunk to just say that cultural heritage is a priority, because when we look at the Africa Union Agenda 2063, for the Africa we want, we're saying that Africa has the largest amount of youths. And so if we invest in them, we are able to also make sure that our culture continues. You know, if we are able to train them and invest in their culture and their heritage, they will see it as they will see themselves as stewards, because you cannot steward what you don't own. Exactly. And if you don't feel like you own it, you will not steward it.
Yes. So who is tasked with enhancing or preserving this culture? Is it a case of government or it's a collective effort?
I think it's a collective effort. It's a pipeline. It's like a race. It's a baton. The way I look at it is, if I start, you can pick it up and go on. So if I am on the ground and maybe mentoring the youth on heritage and culture, then someone else can say, I have 5 internships, either at the Ministry of Culture or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the Cultural Office. We have the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO. We have very many different things. But if I mentor them and they don't get an opportunity, guess what will happen? They'll get tired. They'll have to do jobs, they'll hustle, and then they lose that. What we don't want to do is lose that spark. We don't want to lose that passion. And that's what was done for us. I think I told you earlier that I was in my late 20s when I was learning about World Heritage. But coming from the people who taught me, I could tell it was a fire that was sparked, and there was no stopping me from then. And so when the opportunities were not forthcoming, I did want to give up. But I think I held on knowing that one day it's going to pay off, you know. But it's not everyone we can look at that way. So we need to give them the opportunities, and then we need to make them see the reason why they should steward our culture and heritage.
How do you think cultural exchanges are important in terms of enhancing the understanding of culture and heritage?
Cultural heritages are amazing. I feel like we haven't harnessed that, and maybe that's an opportunity. You know, every time we think opportunity, that Kenya can tap into. I know, for example, World Heritage USA has an exchange program every year where they're getting people from different countries to come and learn from that culture. So how about in Kenya? We have the same opportunities where we have people working at different cultural sites or heritage sites coming into Kenya and learning how we do it, especially because Africa is rich in both built and the intangible. When you look at our dances, we were talking about, you spoke about the rorashios and all these practices. These are very rich cultures that we have. You know, we wish that people would come and just experience them and learn them, and they'd be able to also go back with an experience that they probably appreciate and would help them also just in their daily jobs and what they do. You
know, the people at the grassroots level, there's a sense that they understand culture better than those in the urban setting. But then again, there's also the aspect of organizing these cultural festivals. What is the role of county government here in making sure that the culture and information about culture continues and heritage?
I love that most of the counties have their cultural person. They do. So I feel like once it begins with them, and even when, for us, I think when we went to the Kaya, it was the chief, at that level, you've said at the ground, level. So they have a chance to be the ones organizing. So if right now we have a national workshop on culture and heritage, and we always try that all the 40 plus counties are represented, what happens is, how about when they go back home, they're able to now mobilize on that level, If, for example, you teach you can teach a man to what do they say?
Fish.
To fish, but you can't teach the, that the idea is if you bring them together to learn, then they go back and they still teach the people around them. We are creating a kind of an teach one situation where if one of us learns and they go back home and they teach, if you're coming from Turkana or Kakamega, if you go back and you're able to teach the others, we are creating some sort of ripple effect of appreciation. So that's where the counties can tap in. They need to be able to be the ones that say, we will take up this role, Yeah.
It's also a chance for cultural tourism.
Yes.
And it's an opportunity, as you're saying, that people need to adopt. And these cultural tourism need to happen like very frequently, because it is one of the way of making people understand where they come from as a people and how they can enhance these the good traditional beliefs and practices.
Yeah.
So now, how, culture is not about only doing things. There's also the aspects of crafts. There's also the aspects of marketing.
Yes.
Where does all this fit in here?
So it's interesting because when you look at even the tourist cycle, before they make a decision on where they want to go, we know that Kenya has been on the top, tourist destinations for a long time because of what we have to offer. Number one, if we market if we work on marketing, what we're doing is just creating strategies for people to know why should they come to visit these places. As a marketing person myself, we're looking at, can we give people a visitor experience that is out? Because we build up expectations when you're working on your marketing campaigns. So I'm expecting it to be brilliant when I come. So we look at the visitor experience as well. One of the projects that we did on sustainable tourism post-COVID was training the tour guides in Lamu and Fort Jesus on visitor experiences, letting them know that if someone lands, they're in your hands. So we taught them communication skills, how they can market themselves without being too pushy, because we're telling them, you're our ambassador at this point, And so we were learning even just from them, because we get off the boat at Lamu when they come, they all surround you and they're asking you, where do you want to go? Do you have a hotel? And we're telling them, it's not a bad thing to do that, because we understand that everyone has to make money. But how can you do that with an approach that also makes the visitor feel comfortable? So which is one of the things I really appreciated Kenya last week. With all those international visitors we had, no one complained, from their airport to the people in Mombasa. They spoke about how the people were so nice and they will come again. You could hear people saying, I'm bringing my family. And that's all we want. We want ambassadors to go out and speak about it. Because if you have a bad experience, people won't even remember the good. They always remember the bad. Yes. So I think just all of us taking that ambassadorship role is important in what we are talking about.
From where you stand, what is the role of media in all this?
So the media... The media has a big role to play. I think, first of all, again, people always look to the media.
Exactly.
Right? So as a voice, I think they need to more and more, because it's a very strong, influential voice. How about the media starts promoting local culture in terms of the tribes, the dances? Because if we're looking at, right now it's Christmas time, and almost everyone is just watching those Hallmark Christmas movies. Had we had a Christmas in Masai Mara kind of a movie, we would have wanted to see it. But I feel like people in the media can also help people appreciate their culture. We were talking about it being a place of, once we've had other cultures glorified over ours, people feel like, I need to belong to the other culture than ours. So maybe if we people who work in the media or marketing or can come up with strategies of how can we still uplift the stories of the culture and still work around even the stories. We can do movies that can be also romantic in our cultural spaces. For, this preservation starts at
the very down level, the grassroots level. And somebody would wonder, is there a way to secure funding to help in the initiatives of promoting and preserving our culture and heritage?
There is funding. I mean, when you look at the places that want to preserve cultural heritage, there is funding available, and I think that's what people miss as well, because sometimes people feel like we are alone. We are alone, and of course, if you feel that way, you won't even have the motivation. But there are funding agencies. I know, for example, we have the Africa World Heritage Fund that is specific to Africa. They've been doing a lot of capacity building, both young and older professionals, trying to train them. And when they come in, what they do is they'll pay for the trips and the hotels to be able to send our experts to places to learn. So there are different organizations. There's the World Monuments Fund. There are different organizations that people can look up and that can be able to give grants. I think there are grants available for historic preservation and especially for culture and heritage.
Are there criteria for that?
Yes, it depends. Sometimes people want people who are doing projects, and some people want something maybe to do with sustainability, because we're talking about climate change and all these other things. So once people identify what it is they want to work with, sometimes you start at the national level. You can look at the National Commission for UNESCO, you can look at the UNESCO Regional Office, and their websites are good places for resources to start. The Ministry of Culture or the Cultural Office for Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah.
As we come to a close, how can global audiences be encouraged to support cultural and heritage initiatives?
I think for me, how I look at it is we have to be ambassadors of our own. I organized Africa 24 with my team from miles away, and I knew it was coming home. My organization sponsored the Africa 24, even them not being African and being a World Heritage Site in the US. So I'm looking at it in spaces of we who already know, have been here, we need to give back to our organizations. We need to share the opportunities, and most importantly, we need to mentor so we can bring good things for everyone. I always challenge the diaspora people to be able to bring it back home, and even the people here will be able to also be encouraged to start from here.
So what is your message to anyone who is watching right now as your final submission?
I think as I'm concluding, let's help preserve our culture and heritage. These things are important for generations to come. When you hear the story, because sometimes you look at these sites and monuments and you don't know the story behind them. I think for me, the most powerful, for example, giving you that I work with the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks, I look at them and I just see hills. But when I hear the story of the Native American, indigenous, that they came and they were using 10 million buckets of soil to create these mounds.
10 million buckets of soil?
Yes. How amazing is that story? But if I did not know the story, I would not appreciate it as much. So there's power in a story. Let's keep telling them. And even if they're ignored, one day someone will see the value in that.
And the best way to tell a story is to tell it from your own perspective.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for making time to come on Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is Ms. Njeri Mbure, who is a communication and heritage specialist, speaking to us about promoting our culture and heritage. This is where we cap this conversation. I hope you have learned a thing or three here on Transformative Leaders. My name is Mike Migwe. Good Morning Kenya continues shortly.